Welcome to the Dark Ozarks. We are diving into dark history, legends, and hauntings of the Queen City of the Ozarks, Springfield, Missouri. And there's a lot to cover. We will get back to that in a minute. But first, we want to remind you that the Dark Ozarks podcast is now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and just about any other podcast platform you use. So what is scary about Springfield's past?
Well, there's a lot to cover in the Dark Tales of Springfield. The Queen City fits well in the noir genre. And from murder to war to hauntings, we may be talking about Springfield in more than one episode.
Yeah, and that's before we even get to legends about, vampires and tunnels beneath the downtown or the Albino Farm.
There's been a lot of things happen in Springfield that was very dark, and some that are hard to explain. And of course, it's up to everyone to decide what really happened in some cases.
We will discuss what you thought was merely the largest city in the southern Missouri Ozarks. But first, we want to invite everyone to like, follow, etc. Dark Ozarks on Facebook, Instagram, here on YouTube. Plus, we encourage you to follow the podcast. While you are over on Facebook, you can subscribe to the private Dark Ozarks subscriber group. Why, you may ask? Yes, it does have a small subscription fee, but you receive exclusive content and behind-the-scenes info that you don't get anywhere else. It also helps us bring more original content to Dark Ozarks. You can click the subscribe button on the page. You'll have to log in since there is a payment. We do appreciate everyone.
And now you can get Dark Ozarks t-shirts for sale at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com.
We encourage everyone to check out Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, in person and online on Facebook, and their website, alwaysbuyingbooks.com, for all of your reading needs, including a large section on the paranormal, history, and more, not to mention the building's haunted. Tell Bob and Elise that we sent you.
We also want to thank Beard Engine Brewing Company in Alba, Missouri. Beard Engine Brewing is the only English-style brewery in Missouri and has been twice named Missouri's best brewery by the Missouri Brewers Association. Great beer and great food in a historical building with a noir past. And yes, this building is also haunted. Tell Nate and Tiff that we sent you.
The Queen City of the Ozarks. She is an interesting place that actually has quite a bit of dark history.
Springfield really does have a surprising amount of dark history, and even just in a cursory review of some, and in some of this content, we've had the opportunity to be exposed to for a long time, but some is new for longtime Dark Ozarks listeners and viewers. Some of this is brand new for tonight, and there is an enormous amount of noir, at times inexplicable and sometimes just downright spooky history associated with Springfield, Missouri.
Where do you want to start? You go all the way back. It pretty well starts out with war and not the Civil War.
Yes, I would, just a little bit of a review is something that I find particularly interesting just about Springfield, in terms of visiting. Of course, it has a very historic downtown, a very historic commercial street. There's elements there's sections of Springfield that when you drive through, you innately know that you're going through a historic section of an American city that dates back to the 19th century, well into the 19th century. But there's a lot of Springfield that looks like your classic modern city.
It does. And, lots of what people typically would view as suburbia, big box stores, etc. But once you kind of peel away those layers, there's just a lot that has happened. And Springfield wasn't basically the first thing there. You had Indian settlements in the area.
Yes.
That is now part of the city.
You do, and the area that is now Springfield, for a variety of reasons, was home to a variety of peoples coming through. Something I think oftentimes gets lost. Obviously, the Osage utilized the area for generations, but as the Osage were moved out, there were a number of migrating Native American groups that were either pushed through or pushed to the Springfield area. And, groups like the Kickapoo and the Delaware were dominant, and to a degree left their mark on the region. Of course, the sort of river access area on the James River of Hootentown was a Delaware settlement. And of course we've got Kickapoo High School as well. I think it's funny because people who are not familiar with the tribe, and this is an Algonquin language tribe, sometimes laugh at the name, snicker, and be like, "Oh, that's so silly." Even in Illinois, there's a small city called Kickapoo that I just grew up aware of, and so it's funny because growing up I never thought there was anything funny about the name. So and
I really didn't either, to be honest.
And of course it's perspective, but I'm increasingly fascinated and really, I would say, even going so far as to be really enthralled by the amount of known and then implied Native American history that has transitioned through this particular portion of the Ozarks. The Trail of Tears, a portion of the Trail of Tears, went right through modern day Springfield in the 1830s.
And very few people would really know that. You don't hear that too much.
You do not. And what we're looking at is around 7,000 to 8,000 displaced Cherokee were transited through that space. Essentially, I think it's fair to say, not of their own choice.
Right. Agreed.
And just the impetus of that, and something that is, I think, increasingly interesting, especially in terms of the Ozarks, the eastern Oklahoma Ozarks and the Springfield Ozarks, etc., is that the cultural and the ancestral, or really the ancestral footprint of so many Native peoples remains in a variety of ways, and oftentimes in surprising ways, with people who you might not realize have Native American heritage.
Very true. Very true. I find it interesting that, we just don't think about, in this part of the country, when we think of Indian wars, we think of out west, but
Yes.
We had an Indian war in the 1830s in Southwest Missouri that did affect Springfield. In fact, judge in Greene County in Springfield at one point tried to negotiate. Judge Charles Yancey, who had some other associations with noir happenings in Springfield as well, that we'll get into maybe another time.
And we're really dealing with that the conflict space of a variety of Native American tribes and their interaction with settlers, with locals, new locals, and state government and the federal government is really setting the stage. It would even be a pre-Western mythos of our pre-Western mythos happening in the 1830s in Missouri. And Springfield was officially incorporated in 1838, which puts it about at the same time as the Trail of Tears. And of course, the Indian Removal Act was signed, I believe, in 1830, but the actual relocation took place about 8 years later. And then from, again, Delaware predominantly, the removal or the transitioning away of the Osage, the transitioning through of the Cherokee, and the interactions with the Delaware are very complex and are really putting a note on that conflict, that, you know, setting the stage. And of course, that is not the only element of Western mythos for which Springfield is known.
That is true. We have said this on the Dark Ozarks before, but really it's true that so much of what happened in the Old West happened here first, and a lot of it happened in Springfield, particularly our received conception of a gunfight in the Old West. That we have all watched on however many movies throughout the years of the call out walk down fight. And really the only place that we know that it happened that way was in Springfield one time, but it also gave rise to the first legend of the Old West, that being Wild Bill Hickok.
Yes, and thank you, Harper's Bazaar, for for popularizing this. And it,
well, that and for Wild Bill being a good spin doctor for his own story, because he basically spun his own story for the reporter.
Well, I can't blame him for being good at self-promotion.
No.
It's all part of the fun, but it I find it particularly fascinating that the call out shootout in downtown in the square, you know, it wasn't at high noon, it was about 6 p.m. But this and the tensions leading up to it, over a card game, over the potential of sullied honor, over all of these things, and immediately in the wake of the devastation of the Civil War, and Springfield was a stronghold of for the Union during the Civil War, although it did change hands several times, and two conflicts actually took place within the quote unquote city limits of Springfield in the 1860s. Some of that conflict, which we'll be talking about later in the longer format episode, it was quite dramatic, and, you know, is bloodier than I think we would necessarily imagine, because many people don't even associate Springfield with a battle, let alone two. And, you know, we're coming off of that violence, we're coming off of that partisanship, and we have these images of, you know, these popular culture 20th century images of the classic shootout, and the most dramatic and possibly the only shootout like this took place in what many people don't even regard as the Old West, and that of course is Springfield.
Exactly. And, you know, I think one thing to note is, as someone happened to bring up to us earlier in question, that, well, wasn't this just a duel? But no, this was not a duel. And what we conceive of as the Old West gunfights are very distinct from the history of dueling, including the history of dueling in Missouri. Duels had a code. There were very strict rules. You had seconds, you had selected weapons, and basically they were designed to hopefully not kill anyone, but to be able to say honor is upheld. The gunfight is something different. And that really, I think that really in part came out of the Civil War. These guys had just gone through war. Ironically, you know, Wild Bill Hickok ended up fighting Davis Tutt, who was a Confederate soldier from Yellville, Arkansas, Marion County, who ironically, his family had gone through the Tutt-Everett feud in the 1840s, and his father killed during that feud. And then, ironically, Wild Bill and Dave Tutt were best friends on top of it.
Right. There's, of course, we look at many of these traditions or many of these ideas through a nostalgic lens or a weirdly romantic lens. But I think it is interesting when you take a couple of factors that were comparatively new. Of course, America was comparatively new. Yeah. And this portion of the recently minted United States as a state and as a infrastructure, etc., and consequently as a people and a culture was comparatively new. And we see just the discussion points about how the fact that it is not a duel, of course, first of all, speaks to it wasn't limited to the South, but of course, Southern culture's complex and precise rules for dueling. Mm-hmm. And while Southern culture has clearly impacted the Ozarks and to some degree is part of the Ozarks, I love the reference of the Ozarks as the deep South, far western ragged mountains. I read that someplace, and I love that. But that we're, especially in the 1850s, 1860s, at this point, we are seeing the creation of a new culture. We are seeing the development of an previously non-existent culture. And we're seeing strong direct ties to the honor culture of the Scots-Irish and Scots-Irish immigration. So much so that we still see a sort of a patina or artifice or just a stereotype around it with the idea of feuds, but these were real. and the Scots-Irish culture definitely contributed to that. But we also see something new in terms of the regional culture itself, which is personalities and decisions being made out of the war. These were individuals who were incredibly accustomed to the violence of the war, violence against, brother against brother, figuratively and literally. And the idea that this was immediately post-war, and we see this in Missouri, Arkansas, Ozarks crime, oftentimes heavily romanticized crime, stretching well over, well into the 20th century, that there's this idea that picking up a gun and shooting somebody is just part of the process.
Yeah, that's true. And perhaps that's a good spot to end here. If you want more of the story of how did Bill Hickok become a legend in Springfield, as well as many other dark tales from Springfield, watch for the longer video that will be uploaded tomorrow. We appreciate everyone. And don't forget to check out upcoming events and merchandise at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com. Thank you again to Always Buying Books and Beard Engine Brewing Company for helping bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
And on the next episode, we're going to be discussing more dark tales from the Queen City of the Ozarks, Springfield, Missouri. including The Missing Three and much more. Catch the Dark Ozarks podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Thank you to everyone, and remember,